Here we are. There we go. What a production job by the director, Kathy, over in the corner. Excellent job.
Hello and welcome to the Cinemondo podcast with Kathy, Mark, and Burke, talking about movies, horror, sci-fi, unusual, unknown, forgotten, underappreciated, always interesting. And today, live.
As you can tell.
I'm going to leave.
Are we live?
We are live.
We're live.
It says it right there, Cinemondo live.
Wow.
Okay. Have we recovered from the opening?
Yeah, I think so.
That's great.
It was a little chaotic.
As you may guess from my clever sort of horror franchise style mask at the beginning of the show, they were going to talk about essential 80s movies. And the 80s, people get sort of derisive about the 80s. You know, the 80s get kind of a bad rap. Or people kind of get nostalgic about the wrong things about the 80s sometimes. You know what I mean? Like, it's like... Yeah. If you were there, you know what it was. And then people that are trying to sort of be 80s now are sort of like, nah, it wasn't quite like that.
Well, I think because a lot of people who weren't in the 80s, they're only getting their information from 80s movies and music. So that was always kind of this sort of projection of the best and the most of the 80s. So it almost becomes a cartoon, whereas actually being in the 80s.
Well, the Stranger Things is the 80s, and that you know, it's like that's not my 80s, and I don't know what 80s that is. It's the 80s of maybe a John Hughes movie or some movie from the 80s. But it wasn't
John Hughes movies weren't even my 80s.
Yeah. Well, I think those directors are pretty young. I don't think they were even alive in the 80s. Who are the creators of doing Stranger Things? So they're doing, in a way, I think they're kind of doing a Spielberg reinvention of, like, you know, the 80s as seen through a Spielberg lens.
Yes. Yeah. It's the mall.
Right.
It's the mall. It's the certain style that the kids wore and stuff. It's just not everybody's. It's maybe a person's recollection of the 80s, but it's not. I lived through the 80s, and that wasn't my.
I lived through the 80s. Those damn kids.
But I was like 50 back then.
You're just getting it wrong.
But you know, I think, of course, there's all types of genres of 80s movies, but one that we'll talk about today is horror films or monster films, one of those. And we'll each have one that is not necessarily our favorite 80s movie, but certainly a movie that sort of left a mark for each of us and why we like that film.
Not necessarily horror or monster, but a movie that we found impactful, but in the genre
probably be a genre film.
Yes, and it is definitely genre because that's what I do.
yeah, it is definitely genre. So, Kathy, do you want to start?
Oh no, me? Okay, all right. I'm doing Blue Velvet because Blue Velvet fucking rocks. Okay, first of all,
choice.
At that point, David Lynch. I already loved David Lynch because of Eraserhead. You know, it was like that was such a mind-blowing film at the time. There was just nothing like it. I remember going to the midnight movie and seeing, you know, Eraserhead, you know, at midnight, and I'm in this old art house theater seeing it. I'm like, what in the hell?
Yeah.
And then, so when David Lynch had a new movie coming out, I was thinking, oh, this is going to be one of those weird, you know, at that point, we didn't really know who David Lynch was. It was kind of, he did that really weird, you know, horror indie movie, but what else?
Elephant Man, I think, didn't he?
An Elephant Man, right? Another black and white kind of.
And he did Dune, I think, before Blue Velvet, I believe.
Before Blue Velvet?
Dune. Yeah, I think it was 84.
Yeah.
And
maybe I gave up on David Lynch by then.
Well, I mean, those were like
right.
You know, that was a studio film.
Dune was later, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So I like to leave Dune outside of David Lynch a little bit because I feel like he does strange little films that are just David Lynch genre. He doesn't even do any other kind of genre. He's his own genre.
Yeah. It's like Alfred Hitchcock, you know, it's like I'm on a film noir group on Facebook, and we talk about film noir, and one of the things, I think I might quit this group because one of the things they do with just total regularity that gets so boring is somebody will bring up a movie and say, is this movie noir? And everybody's like, No, because it doesn't have a femme fatale and it doesn't
Right.
have somebody smoking in front of Venetian blinds. And so therefore it is not noir.
Yeah.
And anytime somebody brings up an Alfred Hitchcock movie, it's like, I always get in there and I'm like, Alfred Hitchcock is his own genre.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's like, it's not noir. It's not, a murder mystery. It's not whatever. It's an Alfred Hitchcock movie. And that's what it is with David Lynch. His movies are not, I mean, they're kind of like, Buñuel films, they're surreal. There's and Maya Deren and some people like that, and some French. There's a French film, that I always say is a lot like a David Lynch film, but David Lynch is his own category for sure.
He really is, and no one can do David Lynch. Like, it's just they try. Like, I've seen people try and kind of go down that road, and it just doesn't work.
Most
I think
notably,
the closest,
the directors who took over some of the episodes in the first series of
Twin Peaks,
when they tried to sort of to kind of do David Lynch,
it never worked.
It doesn't work.
That's why I was very excited when The Return came out, Twin Peaks: The Return, because he directed every episode.
Yes.
So you just got pure David Lynch the whole time. That was such a luxury. It was like a huge feast of David Lynch.
That's one of my favorite David Lynch things he's ever done, is that series. I watched it again recently, and it's just like, God, what a cool.
But Blue Velvet is, I saw it in 1986. I think that's when it came out, or 87, with our friend Eric. And I just walked out of the theater like somebody hit me in the head with a frying pan. Like, what was that?
It was David Lynch, but it was also really beautiful. Yeah. And I was used to him doing grimy kind of, I just wasn't ready for this really lush, beautiful. It had a little bit of romance in it, and some really weird romance in it. And it's had this great cast of, Kyle MacLachlan and Isabella Rossellini, Laura Dern, Dennis Hopper. I mean, just insane.
Yeah.
So I feel like Blue Velvet is probably one of his most powerful films on so many levels. It's watchable over and over. It's not so grim like Eraserhead that you're just like, I can't watch any more of this. You have to be in the mood. Blue Velvet you can really watch because it's accessible. Like I said, it's a little more commercial, but it still has that undertone of just really twisted David Lynch shit. So I definitely,
I love the music of Blue Velvet.
The music's so great. Yeah.
And it was filmed in Wilmington, North Carolina. And I know Dino De Laurentiis started a film production studio there. And that was one of the first films they did. It didn't do, but it sort of has that feeling of an outside of a Hollywood production, even though it has all these big stars. It just feels different in a lot of ways.
It's funny too, because it got kind of it was kind of divided critically. Like, people weren't sure. Yeah. You really see the divide in critics when, especially with genre, like people that get it and people that don't. So you get like a normal, just top 40 kind of type movie fan would see that movie and go, what the hell? Because you go in expecting one thing, and he always takes these weird left turns. It makes it super uncomfortable and weird. Lots of weird twisted kinks in it and all this weird stuff. I think, most people go in and think, oh, it's going to be about this guy and he's going to fall in love with this older woman, and then there's going to be this little weirdness, but it gets really weird really fast, and it's just David Lynch style. So I think, he sort of set a tone at that point that when you get a David Lynch movie, you're getting David Lynch, you're not going to get anything else, and you still won't know what's going to happen.
Right.
It's weird. It is a strange, even by today's standards, it's very weirdly fetishistic and dark. I mean, there's some dark stuff in there.
Yeah. Dean Stockwell is just so out there. And
love him.
Yeah. He's so great in that. Yeah. Just
so good.
So many iconic moments in that. Like, everybody quotes Dennis Hopper. If you're ever going to drink another Heineken in your life, you're going to think of Dennis Hopper,
right?
And Pabst Blue Ribbon. If you ever see those in the grocery store, just out of the corner of your eye, you hear Dennis Hopper's voice echoing. Right. You know exactly what he says, and I don't have to repeat it. But one thing about that movie, I remember the way it starts. It has this. I remember getting goosebumps in the theater when it started, because it starts with those blue velvet curtains, and they're just moving, they're just rustling around. And David Lynch has always had this thing about darkness and shadows, and the curtains were so dark, and there's wind rustling, like moving the curtains around. And then that music, it has such beautiful music. That's this melancholy kind of almost dissonant music. And then it goes into that, sort of Leave It to Beaver kind of, picket fence kind of neighborhood. And there's a guy on the waving from the fire truck and slow motion
Yep.
and the guy watering the grass. But then it was that beautiful classic moment where the camera goes, from the beauty and the perfection of 50s Americana, or whatever it is, the camera goes down into the grass and
The
under
soft white underbelly.
Yeah.
Of
And you see
Americana.
these bugs crawling around.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, that's so David Lynch.
Yeah.
And that you're in for something very disorienting and beautiful.
That's a great one, Kathy.
Yeah.
And it's a David Lynch beauty. It's just it's not the kind of beauty that anyone is really anticipating or expecting, but you always get something so purely David Lynch,
It's haunting. That movie haunts me through my whole life, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Mulholland Drive does too.
There. And it's 80s. There's so many iconic movies in the 80s. So I'm very excited to hear what you guys are going to bring up.
Well, I can go next.
Okay.
And certainly this is a little bit more lowbrow, but this I picked this one because I used to rent movies at a food store, and you could rent 99 cents for a VHS, and if you rent 2, you get the third free. But it would be a weekday only, so you'd have to watch 3 movies in one night before you have to return it the next day. So I rented this third movie because it was a freebie, and I started it like at 11 o'clock at night. I'm not going to watch this, and I ended up watching the whole thing. And I was like, that's classic sort of 80s for me. Like I got my money's worth. Anyway, the film is Stan Winston's only directorial effort called Pumpkinhead.
Yes.
Which is a movie I really, really liked when I saw it, and I still really like. In fact, they're doing a remake. I think they're going to film a remake of it. And what I like about it is it's a kind of a Southern Gothic tale.
Yeah.
And it's about revenge. Lance Henriksen is always good in these movies.
Always good in everything.
He's good in everything.
Yeah.
Millennium and all that stuff. Of course, the James Cameron films. But he plays this kind of country guy whose son is killed by these kind of like these kids, these sort of teenage kids. And so he goes to like the old witch, out in the woods, and wants revenge. And of course, that's when Pumpkinhead appears. And it's a very tight 85 minutes. It's really it's very tense and intense, but I think the creature design of Pumpkinhead is one that I can't forget. I think it's a brilliant, interesting looking creature. And of course, all practical effects because it's Stan Winston. Yeah. And of course, he did Terminator and so many other great ones. But he also directed this, so he has a real feel for how the monster moves.
Yeah.
You don't see a lot of the monster, which is good. But the way the monster moves and like kind of comes into like a room or a closet, there was something very eerie about it. And to me, it's essential 80s. If you're talking about monsters, it's this practical effects, sort of really well-made creature that sticks with you.
Yeah.
And that's why I when I think back to 80s, there's a lot of movies, and Evil Dead, and we can go on and on about the films. And this one is sort of like a little bit, it wasn't a huge hit. The sequels were direct to video, but there was something about this movie that sticks with me. And I kind of put it on every couple of years and realized, this is really well made. And I had wished Stan Winston actually made more movies, actually directed more.
Why didn't he? What happened there?
I think he was just
maybe too busy doing incredible special effects.
Maybe he was just maybe it was a lot of work, and maybe he didn't love doing it. I mean, it's a different thing than creating stuff. But that is an essential 80s monster movie for me, even though it's not like an Alien or a Predator or some of those other ones, which he did.
Yeah,
this one's a little smaller, Southern Gothic tale, kind of hits the nail on the head. So
it's a great one. Yeah,
it's essential for me.
Yeah.
I remember one shot that you see the thing just sort of appear in front of a window, and it kind of walks by like unexpected. And it was one of those films. I think the special effects are so good. Sometimes special effects can be so effective that it takes your brain a second to figure out what you just saw. I love that feeling in a film. Like, what the hell did I just see? Was that was it right there? And it does that. And I think you're right about Stan Winston having a feel for how these monsters should be revealed and how they should be seen and how they should be lit. A lot of times by the time the special effects arrive on the set, the DP and the director have already decided how to light and show and frame and block and all that. And they sometimes maybe miss opportunities for revealing and showing how effective a monster can be. And you're right, Stan Winston understood the appearance of a monster and how to reveal it and how to have it come into the story. It's
And
it's
also,
a very cool one.
Well, there's going back to the original Alien. There's one shot near the end where the alien, you never really get good look, but there's one where he's sort of gliding, across the camera, and like almost like floating.
Right.
And it's like that always sticks with me. And I think that Pumpkinhead shot is sort of the same thing. It's sort of walking across, and the head is just sort of gliding across the window.
Yeah.
And I remember, it's just creepy, and I think that kind of sticks with me.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So that's a really good one.
A good one that people have probably forgotten about, but like I said,
I haven't seen
a remake
since it came out. Really,
it's a very
either, but I do remember that.
Well, it has such a goofy name, you just think it's not going to be good, and then it ends up with this great craftsman, who's going to bring in this amazing creature design. And like, oh yeah, these movies can be elevated a little bit.
Right. Yeah. And that was a lower budget film, but it brought in Stan Winston. So you knew the creature was going to at least be good, but he actually knew how to direct the movie. And it was, again, Lance Henriksen was always interesting for me to watch, so a fun 80s movie for me.
Very cool.
Excellent choice.
Yeah.
Mr. Burke.
Well, mine's a weird choice then compared to you guys have picked like really, really good ones. Mine is a good one too, but, I picked mine because of something weird about it. I think it fits more into a 70s movie because it has a real 70s movie vibe to it. But I just love this movie. I love this style of horror film. And to me, my favorite horror films are from the 70s. So I always liked it when people would use those sensibilities and those techniques and the feeling of a 70s style horror movie. And there's a few of them in the 80s that you could actually put into the category of 70s horror. You know what I mean? This one that in particular is a favorite of mine, and it's called The Changeling. And
that is a very 70s kind of movie.
Right on the edge of the 70s and the 80s, 1980.
Yeah.
And it's got, it's got George C. Scott and Melvin Douglas and, this classic cast, the way they used to do in the 70s, where they would have, Gregory Peck and Lee Remick and, Ellen Burstyn and Lee J. Cobb and people like that would be in horror films.
Right.
And this is kind of a holdover to that vibe where serious actors were still doing, what we called serious actors were still doing horror films. And I think, George C. Scott did a couple. He did An Exorcist. That's a really good Exorcist sequel. And he was in this one. And this is a supernatural thriller. It's a ghost kind of a thing. And it's got like one of those heartbreaking stories at the core of it where a personal tragedy hits, and the characterizations are really good. You really like, and you buy George C. Scott as this guy who's distraught over a tragedy in his family. And then the story of, the reason that the haunting is happening is really cool and sad and convoluted. And there's some detective work in there. And it's actually really scary too.
Right.
It is. Yeah. I saw that at the theater, and the director is Peter Medak, who just everything he does is really good. He's still working today, directing some high-end TV stuff.
He does a lot of TV stuff,
right. And but I remember I saw it at the theater, and I said nothing scares me, and this is but this one actually had very subtle things that like, oh my god, I have the classic spine tingling feeling, like the hair on the back of my neck kind of stuff going on. And the thing is, and I'm just gonna say George C. Scott and Trish Van Devere, who I think George C. Scott's wife at the time, was really good in that too.
Yeah, definitely.
And to me, that's the thing about 70s movies that I love so much, is that they were scary. A lot of them, there were you think about the scariest movies ever made, and if you have a well-rounded view of horror movies, then most of your scariest movies are going to come from the 70s. I believe that's for me anyway. Right. There's a feel to it, the feel, like we talk about that movie, The Sentinel, that's a 70s movie, and that's a scary movie. And there's things about it that are weird and off-putting and unsettling and all. And I think in the 80s, one of the things is sort of a stereotype of an 80s horror film is that they were goofy. You know, they were like Gremlins and Ghoulies and all these movies and um, Freddy Krueger, and everybody's like, oh, you know, Freddy Krueger is kind of this this sort of a, you know, almost like a cartoon character. And there's a lot of cartoonish kind of movies from the 80s, and they weren't really scary to me.
No.
But they're fun. Some of them are really fun. Like Child's Play is goofy, but I love that movie. But The Changeling definitely, like you said, has a scary vibe to it.
Yeah. It's also that, you know, 70s movies have a different, you just in general, the 70s movies have a kind of a more, there's a reality to them. So The Changeling feels like a real story. Of course, Freddy Krueger is not, you know, it's kind of goofy.
Right.
There was no sequel to The Changeling. It's a one and done, you know, and it's a complete story.
It's maybe made for adults.
It's that kind of genre. I just love the people moving to the big kind of creepy house. It's just my most favorite thing. I just love the driving, usually through a winding road in the forest. You end up in this beautiful house, but then of course the house has problems, which is usually a ghost or something very creepy. And especially, you know, someone like George C. Scott, I mean, he's just such an insane, intense actor. He just brings this whole other level to this kind of a film, because you know, you have the sort of more restrained performances in films like these a lot of times, but he's just like off the rails. Fun. Fun.
I think because The Exorcist was such a monster hit in the early 70s that they were like, let's try to make movies in that vein. So you had The Omen and The Changeling and The Sentinel and Burnt Offerings and on and on and on and on. And they all sort of have that vibe. It's like a real characters, a family situation, but there's something off. And we all can relate to that.
I think the grandma of all those is Rosemary's Baby. I think that's like a real, that's sort of the prototype for The Exorcist and The Omen and those kind of movies, I think. And so, you know, credit where it goes. And that's a 60s movie.
That's a 60s movie, but late 60s. But The Changeling, you can almost say that was like the last sort of 70s, you know, kind of horror scary movie before, you know, the slasher films. Of course, Halloween was 78 and Friday the 13th was 1980. So sort of that was the changeover to slasher and all that stuff that happened afterwards.
And there was another one after The Changeling that I thought was equally 70s-ish and also scary, was that movie Ghost Story. Remember that one from
based on the Peter Straub book, which was a very scary book.
Yes.
The book is fantastic.
I just love those gothic, quiet, creepy, dark kind of movies like that. There's just something really, it's usually, you feel like it's a movie you watch when it's raining outside, and you know, it has always a mahogany wood everywhere. It's just dark, and it's usually really sad at the very heart of it. It's mostly just super sad. It's like, there's just something great about heartbreaking. It's just there's just that genre that I think isn't done as much anymore. So I really enjoy it when they do it.
And I kind of have to blame the whole Blockbuster thing, you know.
Here's Chad. Chad says hi. But hi, Chad.
Chad saying hi. Okay.
I'm saying hi to our commenters. If you have any questions about 80s movies, Chad, let us know.
But the idea of the Blockbuster, you know, like when things like Poltergeist came along, I mean, I love Poltergeist, but I think it kind of killed those sort of lower key 70s style movies. And everything then from that point on had to have sort of a, you know, a franchise, maybe a franchise character, like, you know, like a Freddy or something like that. And it also had to have a huge blowout at the end where the house is completely destroyed and pulled up into a glowing optical vortex that, you know, those kind of
big tent pole, like huge studio. There's a place for that, I guess. You know, I feel like when studios take horror and make them big, they're not scary at all.
No,
and I don't think they're wanting to be. They're just super, like you said before, easily digestible, not too scary. It's the little low budget, cool movies that are the scariest.
But I will say, though, I feel those are coming back. Like there are a lot of low budget, you know, sort of scary haunted house movies that are streaming all over the place. You just have to hunt them down.
Yeah.
And there are varying degrees of quality and whether they work or not. And some of them don't. But I always seek them out. And sometimes I'm pleasantly surprised.
So I think, you know, Haunting of Hill House, that series from Mike Flanagan, sort of went there. I mean, it was a big show, and it was, is multiple episodes, but I feel like they kind of captured that a little bit smaller, creepier haunted house feeling. I think he was really trying to go for that, and I think it was mostly successful. It had a few moments that were big, but mostly I feel like it was very personal. It was really based on like tragedy and, like you said, like heartbreak that ghosts always have at the core of a good ghost story. I think his was probably the closest he got to lately. I'm trying to think of films like that. It was the big house the family moves into. I thought that was really well made.
Yeah,
but there are other things like The Haunting of Julia from the 70s, and those kind of and Don't Look Now, and even things like The Eyes of Laura Mars and those kind of movies. Yeah. But Don't Look Now is such a scary film, and The Haunting of Julia is one of those heartbreaking things. It's kind of like Don't Look Now, where it starts with a horrible tragedy, and it kind of deals, and that movie The Babadook, that's a more recent film that I think kind of tried to tap into that horror being wrapped around a core of family tragedy, and of course I always go back to Hereditary, which I think is a beautiful 70s movie that was made in the present day.
I was going to bring up Ari Aster for that, because he definitely, Hereditary got really close to that cool kind of really creepy low budget, not really haunted house, but it sort of had that feel. Yeah,
Midsummer is very, very much like Wicker Man.
From the 70s. Yeah.
So he's tapped in. Mike Flanagan has tapped into what scared them when they were younger. Or
he definitely gets it.
So those are directors that we love and can't wait for their next films.
Yeah,
but hopefully Ari Aster will stay around in that area that he's in, and he won't sort of move forward a decade and do a remake of Critters or something.
I would welcome a Gremlins. I've heard rumor there might be a Gremlins series, or needs
directed
to be
by Ari Aster.
Oh God,
I would love him to do anything from Charles Band. I'm in.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
He still owes me some paychecks.
So we're gonna try and do because there's so many 80s movies that are great, and everybody loves 80s, and we're gonna start doing this every Saturday if we can. We're gonna start doing live broadcasts around 1:30. We're gonna start talking about 80s movies. Would love to have you guys come along every Saturday if you have a half hour, 45 minutes to talk to us in the comments and ask us, tell us about your 80s movies or stuff you want us to recommend.
Please do.
Where the comments are. And definitely subscribe so you're sure you get the alert. Hit the little bell so you get an alert when we go live. You definitely don't want to miss it. So we'd love to talk to you guys more. And I think 80s movies are a great way to do it because there's so many good ones. So definitely join us in our next Saturday.
Do that, and also check out all our other videos. We've got a plethora of reviews and our podcasts are on there. So
you said that like Russ Meyer.
I know. I don't say plethora.
He says plethora.
I do. I follow everything. Russ Meyer is my
plethora.
Well, this was fun.
It was very fun. So join us next week.
Did we do okay? Any thumpering? Any screw ups besides plethora?
Besides me kind of trying to get it figured out and pick the lowest res trailer I could find for Changeling. Other than that, I think it was great. We're learning, guys. So
Also, I'd really like to say thanks to everyone, and I'd really love to announce that we have actually 2 million subscribers. But I can't because we don't.
We're going to, though, very shortly, like probably about 50 years, we are going to have 2 million subscribers.
We really would like to have 5 million subscribers.
Tell all your friends because we're trying to hit that goal.
If you have 5 million friends, just tell them and we're done.
Yeah, it would be so easy.
And we'll send you free stickers.
There have to be 5 million people out there with time on their hands.
And we've got cool stickers. We really do.
We do. Yes, you guys, seriously. We have so many cool stickers. And, we had a giveaway that was only for until we hit our first 100. Well, we're way past that. So if you want stickers, these are great stickers. Summer holograms. Then send us your email address and let us know if you trust us, our shipping address. Send it to your grandma, whatever you need. Just give us an address that you trust us to send something to, and we'll send you stickers. It'll be super fun.
Postage paid. We pay for the postage.
We are not paying for postage. That's a total lie. Mark is lying. Not paying for postage. No, we will pay for postage. We will ship it out for you.
Yeah.
Make Mexico
you don't have
pay
to
for
spend
postage.
any money. You just have to tell your friends to subscribe and send us your address. So be sure and do it.
Thanks very much for joining us.
All right, you guys. See you next Saturday.
Bye, y'all.